Denki is one of the characters that Viking just added to My Hero Ultra Rumble, and today I want to give you a brief overview of what he can do, so you can excel with this character when you pick him up during the open beta or even during the final game. Just keep in mind, things might change from here until the final game comes out, and even afterwards there are balanced patches, but at its core, I believe the character design will remain the same. So without further ado, here's the character overview for Denki. Denki is a strike character, meaning he buffs your entire team's attack power. His auto combo and jumping attacks are fairly standard, there's nothing particularly special about him in this regard, but he does have a special action called Electrification. When you activate it, Denki will gather electrical energy around him, and for a short time he'll deal damage to any enemies that come in contact with him. It's like getting a spiky suit of armor, where it's gonna hurt the opponents that attack you, but it's also going to slightly buff your damage if you go for melee attacks, or for his Gamma ability that deals damage from melee range. That said, let's take a look at his quirks, starting with his Alpha quirk, the Electro Target. Denki fires off an electrical bullet that deals damage if it hits the opponent. The bullet then becomes an orb that sits in place and connects to other orbs that you shoot. You can connect up to 3 orbs. I mean, usually I've done 4 orbs on occasion, but it's usually just 3. And this electrical net stays on the stage for a long time, so it's great to limit the enemy team's movement and help out in team fights. As usual, if you level up this ability, its attack power goes up, but at levels 4 and 9 you get some bonus stats. The skill gets a minor cooldown reduction and you get an extra bullet in the chamber. Also, the connection distance between the bullets is increased. It took me a while to realize, but you can actually hold down the button to shoot the bullets further. At first it felt like it was just a short range character, but turns out I was just not smart enough. You hold the button and the range will come. That said, it still feels like his effective range isn't as long as someone like Bakugo or Todoroki, since those bullets have some travel time. They don't instantly hit the target as you pull the trigger, so they feel more effective when you are closer to your opponent. Also, it's much easier to build electrical triangles if you are closer than further away. Next up, the beta quirk 1.3 million volts, aka the Dome. A big orb of electricity around your character, and anyone caught in it takes damage. So this is a big area of effect ability that you can hold down and keep active while you have meter available. And it will force opponents to leave your area if they don't want to die. Because if you level up this ability, it can really tear through health bars. It's not a lot of damage for a single target, but the damage isn't split amongst enemies. So in a team battle, it can really come in clutch. That said, this ability does not stun the opponent, so they can usually simply roll away or walk out of the dome, but you can also stop the dome at any time and chase down your opponents with other attacks. If you keep holding down the button until the meter is empty, you will enter derp mode, which will last for 8 seconds. While in derp mode, you can still move around, albeit very slowly, and you cannot attack, so you are completely defenseless. That said, it's pretty easy to avoid entering this mode if you just keep an eye on that meter and stop holding the button. Leveling up your beta quirk increases the attack damage as usual, but on levels 4 and 9 it will also increase the size of the dome and reduce the derp time. Finally, his Gamma quirk is the Human Stun Gun. Denki will dash towards an opponent, dealing damage, stunning them, and slowing their movement. This ability gets buffed if you have Electrification active, and it combos perfectly with the dome. Since the opponent is briefly stunned, that means they cannot avoid the dome damage. This is also a great ability for Denki's movement. It's his only movement ability, in fact, but it can help you climb buildings or cross long gaps, as the dash will go exactly towards where you're pointing your camera to. In combat, it has decent tracking, so you don't have to perfectly aim it at your opponent. That said, relying on this tracking too much may end up sending you flying out of bounds. I love this ability, but it also feels a little bit broken right now, as I got interrupted out of it so many times during this beta, and the ability cooldown was triggered every time I got interrupted. Now, interrupting abilities and triggering the cooldowns, I think it's fine in general, but this is an ability that you use to engage the enemy, to get it on a team fight, so the chances of you getting knocked out of it are really big. And now that we know his abilities, it's time to utilize them to their full potential. Here are 3 builds that I recommend you go for with Denki, but do keep in mind that sometimes you don't choose your build, the build chooses you. The cards you find on the stage are random, and sometimes the build just kinda happens. Don't let those cards go to waste, be ready to adapt and change your plans on the fly. Build 1, all in melee. Prioritize your beta quirk, the Dome, over everything else. After that, you prioritize your Gamma ability, leaving your Alpha for last. You should still use your Alpha, but you're mostly going to be fighting in melee range. After you buff up your Beta and Gamma abilities enough, you should be able to melt shields and health bars, provided you know how to chase your opponents. Remember that not everyone is going to stand in your dome waiting for their health bar to deplete, so using your Gamma ability to get in isn't always the smartest idea, because then it will be on cooldown. Sometimes it's better to save it for when the opponent tries to run away from your dome. Build number 2, the Electric Zoner. This one is almost the opposite of what we just talked about, but it's one build that you can go for if you have a shield on your team or teammates who can grab the opponent's attention from melee range, because your goal is to zone them out primarily with projectiles, not only dealing dealing damage directly with the bullets, but also creating electrical nets to restrict their movement. But to do this, you need to be safe. You need a shield that protects you, or you need the opponent's attention to be on someone else, someone fighting from melee range. But it's because of this that it's important to get that alpha to level 4 as soon as possible to facilitate the nets that you create in between your bullets. You only get into melee range when you're going for the kill. Once your opponent's armor is broken, that's when you use your Gamma ability to stun them and the Dome to finish them off. Finally, here's build 3, the Zoomer. In principle, this is similar to build 1, where it's mostly a melee build, but this time your focus is on mobility and stunning the opponent, rather than catching enemy teams with a Dome. This build is surprisingly effective in the early game, as you can use your Gamma ability to chase down kills and to stun the opponent when they don't have that many tools to deal with it. That said, if you take too long to level up your Gamma skill, this build will quickly lose its effectiveness as players build more shields and get stronger abilities. So to summarize, Denki is very strong at zone control thanks to his electrical traps, fighting in tight spaces where opponents don't have much space to maneuver, so they can't dodge those nets or your Dome, and he's very strong at initiating since he's got that medium range dash that stuns an opponent. With some good team coordination, you could really nuke someone before they even get out of that stun. That said, this is a character that does not excel at the long range because those bullets have some travel time. They don't instantly hit the opponent, so it becomes hard to hit them if they're really far away. And in the late game, he also struggles in 1v1s since most characters can easily leave the Dome and the human stun gun has a pretty long cooldown. So his damage output is just going to be a quick burst, but for sustained 1v1 battles, there are a lot of characters that will do a lot better than him. In a team game like My Hero Ultra Rumble though, no character is supposed to be perfect, and there are characters that plug his flaws really well, which is why I think it's important to talk about character synergy. That said, this is based on my limited time with the character, and the entire roster still hasn't been announced. So think of these characters as more of an idea of what Denki likes to play with, rather than a fixed list of characters that Denki will thrive right next to. I feel like Kendo is going to be a favorite for a lot of ranged characters. Being able to stand behind their shield while shooting projectiles is always going to be great, but I think for characters like Denki, even more so, because he can't be too far from the action. And so, if he's in the mid-range, he's always in danger, unless he is behind the Kendo shield. Just close enough to jump into a team fight, stunning an enemy with a human stun gun, and finishing the job. Besides, Kendo is really the only one that can say, "Pikachu, I choose you!" A shield isn't always needed to keep Denki safe though, as trap characters can do the same for him. I'm talking about Shigaraki and Dabi, who can both leave damaging abilities on the ground. Denki can try to stand in these traps and these abilities, making sure that opponents cannot rush you, because if they do, they're going to be taking damage from Denki and those traps that are still dealing damage on the ground. They're in a world of pain. But Denki doesn't always need protection, he can also be used to complement other characters. Take Mount Lady for instance. Once she grows into a giant, her Stomp quirk deals massive damage, but it has one massive flaw. It takes a long time to activate, often giving opponents enough time to leave its area of effect. Well, not if they're stunned. Denki restricting an enemy's movement with his bullets and stunning them with human stun gun makes them sitting ducks for Mount Lady's massive damage. These two together can be a truly devastating combo. And that's Denki in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed this brief overview, and if you'd like to learn more about My Hero Ultra Rumble, check out this video going over all the new features in this open beta. Thank you for watching. Bye!